Hi there, this is Alan from Computer Explorers. I'm here for our third tutorial. Hopefully you've had a chance to see the previous two, and if you've enjoyed them, hopefully this one will be very similar for you. The idea again is that we're going to be making a video game in Scratch. I'll run through the various different steps that are required to put the game together and give you a few hints and tips on things that you can do to make the game more interesting, to personalise it, to make it a bit more difficult at the end of this tutorial. So let's first off get a look at the Scratch website, and then we can look at a demo of the game. As before, we're going to be using Scratch. Here are the details for how you can access it using the website scratch.mit.edu. When you get there, all you need to do is click Create in the menu at the top of the screen, and that should open the main website, and you might have a little pop-up to get rid of which gives you tutorials. So hopefully that should be a pretty straightforward process for you. Here's the game that we want to make this time. As you saw, it's called Avoid the Red, and the reason is obvious. We are going to play as the cat, and the idea is that we have to avoid anything red in the game. So that's the border of the screen and also the ball in the middle, which is going to start moving around in a minute. So let's just have a look at it. To start the game, as you see, I have to click on the space key, and I can move the cat around with the mouse and avoid anything red. You can see my score is currently 0. If I touch something red, it increases by 1. But that's not all. So now it's a bit more difficult to avoid anything red because there are more balls on the screen. They're all moving in random directions, and things obviously are a little bit more difficult. My score's now up to 6, and even more difficult still. So the game lasts for a minute, and the idea is to keep your score as low as possible in that time. So, game over. My score is 36, and the more you play the game, it doesn't get any easier, so you just have to keep on trying. So having seen the demo of the game, let's break it down into the various different sections so that we can work on one at a time. So, first off, we've got the movement of your player, the cat. Then we've got to look at the way that the red balls move, and obviously there are a few of them, so it's going to be slightly complicated to get those working, but there is a fair amount of duplication, so that's not so bad. Next up, we've got the scoring system, which is pretty straightforward. It's actually tied in with the movement of your player. There's the timer, because the game lasts for a minute. And then some finishing touches. You'll have noticed there was a sound happening, and we can talk about how maybe you could input a high score or perhaps a low score, if that's really the best way to manage it, into your game. So let's have a look at Scratch. Okay, so I've opened Scratch, and we've got a completely brand new blank project to work on. If you need to work out the various different aspects or elements to the Scratch screen, watch my previous video tutorials. Just a quick summary: we have got in the left hand side over here the library of blocks that are available to us. They're color coded in different categories, so the blue ones are the motion blocks, the purple ones are the looks blocks, the pink ones are the sounds blocks, yellow ones are events, etc, etc, and we're going to be using examples from most of these. The central area of the screen is where we do our coding. The area over here where the cat is the screen. That's where everything happens, and below that is where we can see the thumbnails of the sprites that we create. So first up, we're going to do a little bit of work on some variables that we require for our game. Now, variables are down here. They are the orange option, the orange category, and there is one variable that's been created, as you can see. If I grab the block, this is the block that says set my variable to 0, so it's just generic called my variable. If I right click on my variable, you can see that I can rename it, and I'm going to rename it score, because we are going to need to keep score. And then I'm also going to need another variable, which I'm going to get by clicking this make a variable button, and I'm going to call that timer. And that's great. That means we've got both of the variables that we now need. Now, our sprite, the cat that we're going to use in our game, is going to be controlled by just moving as the mouse pointer moves. So, we'll go to the events blocks. Now, when the green flag is clicked and we start the game, we want him to go to a starting position, maybe somewhere over here. That way we know that he's going to start in the same place every time. So, when the green flag is clicked, we will say, go to this location. It turns out that it's -159 and the Y is 0. That's the position for him. So that's where he's going to go when he starts. And if you remember, in the game, it said click the space bar to start the game. So, we're going to need a separate event which says when space key is pressed. So, when the space key is pressed, we then want to be able to control the cat. So, we're going to get a control block, and we're going to say forever go to the mouse pointer. Okay, so forever go to the mouse pointer. So wherever I move the mouse pointer, the cat will go. So we'll click the green flag. He goes to there. When I click the space bar on my keyboard, he goes to my mouse pointer, and I can move him wherever I want to. Okay. So that way, that works. We know that is quite a nice little activity. Now, we're also going to say that whenever, or we're going to put the score code onto the cat as well. Whenever the cat touches something that is red, then we are going to get him to increase his score. Now, there's nothing red on the screen at the moment, so it's not going to change, but we can still put the code in. So, we're going to go to those control blocks, and we're going to use an if-then block. In between the if and then, we're going to put a sensing block, which says if I am touching a colour. Now we can specify what that colour is. If we click on the little red or sort of purpley panel here, you can see that the colour is described by numbers. If I move all of these sliders so that the numbers are 100, that is going to be the red colour that I'm going to use. So it's a really easy number for us to use. So forever if I am touching the red colour, then I want to do something. I'm going to change the score by 1. So I'm going to increase my score by 1 every time I touch something that's red. And then I'm going to have a little pause, a little wait. It's just going to be 0.2 seconds. And then that will run again. So we'll pop that in there inside the forever loop. So it says when the space key is pressed, I'm always going to go to the mouse pointer. And if I'm touching a colour red, then I'll increase my score by 1, and I'll wait a small moment, just 0.2 of a second. Okay, that should allow us to run the cat, and the cat should do exactly what we want now. We may come back and add some more code to the cat in a minute, but that should get things sorted to start with. So let's move on to the next section. So, that's the first part of the game done. We've got the movement of our player sorted out. The next thing we need to do is the red parts of the game, the balls, and also the outline around the screen. Let's get those sorted out now. With our player done, we've now got to put a red ball onto the screen. So we're going to create a new sprite for that. We'll use the blue sprite button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll paint the sprite. So that's the second button up, the one that's like a little paintbrush. And now we've got the opportunity to draw something on screen. Now, I'm going to draw a circle, and I want to draw it in red. Now, to get red, we're going to go all the way across to 100. So each of these options is 100. The colour is 100, saturation and brightness both 100. So our colour is red. We're not going to give our ball an outline, so we're going to click on outline here and click through the strike through, so there is no outline. Now, when we're drawing the ball, you'll see that right in the middle of this checkered area there is a dot. That's the middle of your sprite. Whatever you draw, that's going to be the centre of it. So you want to draw your circle, the circle for your ball, over the top of this little dot in the middle here. So go up to the sort of top left corner, click down and drag diagonally across until you get a circle. You're probably not going to get a perfect circle, but it'll be close and that'll be fine. And there you go, you've now got a new sprite which is a red circle, which is exactly what you want. We can then click up at the top on the tabs, the Code tab, and we can start to give our block or our circle some instructions. For the red ball, we're going to say when the green flag is clicked, go to the centre of the screen, because that way it's always starting from a regular position. We'll need from the blue motion blocks a go to X and Y. If we change the numbers for both of those to 0, that will be the middle of the screen. Now, at some point during the game, this red ball is going to hide. So what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we can see it at the beginning of the game. So we'll go to the looks blocks and grab a show. And also what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it doesn't really rotate. So I'm going to go to the motion blocks, and one of the last ones is set rotation style. And you can choose different rotation styles. I'm going to choose don't rotate. Now that means that it won't spin round. If your ball or your circle is not perfect, then this will avoid it looking like it's kind of slightly lumpy. So I'm going to pop that in there as well. Now, as you remember from the demo, the game actually starts, once everything's set up with the green flag, it actually starts by clicking on the space bar. So we're going to click on the space key, and we are then going to say for our ball, we want to program a bit of movement for it. So we're going to say forever move 10 steps. That's the speed it'll move. If we increase the number from 10, it'll move faster. If we decrease, it'll go slower. But we'll start with 10 for that. And so we'll go forever move 10 steps. And obviously, when we get to the edge of the screen, we don't want to lose it. So we're going to go to one of the bottom blue blocks, which says if on edge bounce. Now, if I put that together and hit the space bar, that's tremendous. That's exactly what we want. Now, at the moment, the ball is programmed to be moving in direction 45, as you can see here. Now, that would mean that we've got it moving in a very predictable direction. What we don't really want is we don't really want to know which direction it's going in. We want to make it a bit more unpredictable. So we're going to grab this point in direction block, and we're going to grab a random block, so I pick random. And as we know, the direction can be changed, and it's got a number associated with it. So if we wanted our ball to go straight up, the number would be 0. If we wanted to go straight down, it would be 180. But I think I actually wanted to go sort of somewhere between maybe 30 and maybe down to 150. Because that way we know it's going to go off at an angle of some sort. So we will change the numbers in the random block to 30 and 150. Pop that into the point in direction. And we'll put that immediately under the when space key pressed. Don't put it inside the forever loop. Okay, so I press my green flag to start everything. I press the space bar, and my ball starts moving. And that's exactly what I want. I can move my cat around using the cursor on the screen. That's tremendous. Exactly what we want to happen. To get the next piece of the game working properly, we're going to need to make sure that the timer is working. To do that, I'm going to have to put together a piece of code that starts a timer. I'm going to put this on the stage because it's somewhere where we're not dependent on a particular character. It's an activity or it's a piece of code that relates to everything in the game. So if I click over here at the bottom of the screen on the stage section, I get to be able to put together some code for the stage. You'll know that you're there because you can click on the motion blocks and see stage selected, no motion blocks. You can't move the backdrop, you can't move the stage. So you'll know that you're in the right place. So to do this, what we need to do is we need to say, from the events block, so when the green flag is clicked, I'm just going to set my variables to 0. So we'll set the score to 0 and we'll set the timer to 0. Okay, so that's great. That's when the green flag is clicked. When the space key is pressed, which is when we actually start everything moving, I want to start a timer. So I'm going to get, from the control section here, I'm going to get a repeat loop. Okay, so this is a bit like the forever loop in that things inside the loop will continue repeating them or continue happening. But this one is limited to a certain number of cycles through whatever's happening. I want the game to play for a minute, and I'm going to call that 60 seconds. So if I repeat this for 60 seconds, wait 1 second, and then repeat the loop again, everything inside here is going to happen 60 times, or once a second. So the things I want to happen, well, I want the variable, which is called timer. There you go, there's timer, to change by 1. So change the timer by 1. That means that our timer will start at 0, because we've set it to 0 here, and when the space key is pressed, it will then change by 1. Okay. I'm also going to put in a little bit of sound, which will just make things a little bit more interesting. So, in the sound category here, we've got a sound called pop, which is the sound that comes with the game. What we're going to do is we are going to set the pitch of pop by -100. Set it to -100. We're then going to start the sound pop, and we're then going to change the pitch by 5. Okay, and if I pop that inside or underneath the space key pressed, we should find that green flag sets everything to 0. We press the space key, and we can see that the timer is increasing by 1 every second, and we're getting a little pop sound going every second as well, which is exactly what we want. That's fantastic. Now we need to move on to the next sprite, which is going to be the smaller of the next size down balls, the first one of those. Now we can actually do a little bit of copying and pasting to make sure that this looks good. So I'll just click the green flag. There we go. There's our 2 current sprites back in position. I'm actually going to move the red one. So if we go to the costumes for this sprite, we've got our circle, our ball. If I click copy just here, I've copied that design. I can then go to choose a sprite and paint, and then I can click paste, and I've got my circle again. Okay, and you can see I've now got 2 sprites on screen that look the same. So if I go to the code, I can now see that on sprite 2 I've got this code to get it to move around. On sprite 3, which is this one, currently got no code. I'm actually going to make this sprite a little smaller. I'm going to move it down to 65 from the size option here, and that way it's smaller, so it's easy for us to tell which is which on screen. So sprite 3, there are a few things that are kind of similar to sprite 2 about it. So if I go to sprite 2, I'm going to grab this whole piece of block here, this whole piece of code, and drag it down and drop it on top of the sprite 3 thumbnail just here. You see it just rocks when you drop over the top of it. I'm going to do the same with this one as well. Drop that there, and you see that now both of those 2 pieces of code have been copied onto sprite 3. So sprite 2 and sprite 3 will both do exactly the same thing. Now we don't actually want them to do the same thing, so we've got to make some changes to this. Now first off, when the green flag is clicked, I'm very happy to set the rotation style to don't rotate, but I don't want my my sprite to be seen. So I'm going to change this in the looks category to hide. So when the green flag is clicked, we hide. Can't see our block at all. Okay, so that's fine. I don't need these anymore. I'll delete those for a second. When the space key is pressed, we actually want a few things to happen. But I'm going to deconstruct this because there's some of it we're going to use and some of it that we're not. So first off, when the space key is pressed, we're going to forever do a few things here. Now we want to basically get our block or our ball to hide for the first 20 seconds of the game, and then show up and then hide again for the last 20 seconds of the game. So we're going to need to do another comparison of what when the timer is greater or less than certain numbers. So we're going to go into the operator's blocks, and we are going to say, we're going to get an AND block, we're going to get a greater than, and we're going to get a less than. So we'll use a couple of these timer blocks. So when the timer is greater than 20 and less than 41, so when the timer is greater than 20 and the timer is less than 41, we want to do a few things. Okay, actually I'll move that out of there and I'll use that, and I'm going to use a if-then loop, just an if-then loop. So we'll go into the control category and get an if-then loop. Okay, so if the timer is greater than 20 and less than 41, then I want to, from the motion blocks, go to the sprite number 2, go to sprite number 2, point in a random direction, and then I want to show, because I want to be able to see my my block. Okay, so if the timer is between that, I want to show. Now I want to be able to get my this second ball to be able to move. So I'm going to use these move 10 steps and if on edge bounce blocks that we used before. I'm going to get my ball to move slightly faster, so I'm going to increase from 10 to 15. And I'm actually going to put this inside, not on the bottom of, inside the if then else loop. And I'm going to pop that all inside the first forever loop. Okay. So we'll just stop that. So when the green flag is clicked, sprite number 3 hides, we can't see it. When the space key is pressed, we know what happens with the first two sprites, and we can just watch them moving around, and on 20 seconds we should see a change in behaviour. There we go. We've got one new sprite, which is exactly what we want. That's tremendous, absolutely what we want to happen. Okay, and on 40 seconds we should find that this ball hides. And as I said, we want to make sure that our second ball will hide when we get to the 40-second mark of the game. So to do this, very simply, we'll get a when space key pressed, and we'll then say when the time gets to 40 seconds. So we'll say forever, I'm going to look out to see if something is happening. The thing that I'm going to look for is whether or not the timer is greater than 40. So we use that operator's block to use the greater function. So if the timer is greater than 40, then we will hide. That's in the looks blocks. We'll hide, and actually we'll stop all the other controls or everything else that's happening with this sprite. So there's a stop block here. So we can actually just say stop all other scripts in this sprite. So that means that all of this will stop. So that should mean that we've got our sprite on screen for the 20 seconds, the middle 20 seconds of the game. The next thing we need to do is we need to get this sprite to be duplicated, because we need to have two of these sprites, and we want them to go, when they appear on screen, we want them to kind of go in opposite directions, so it looks like the first ball sprite has split in two. Now what we'll do is we will duplicate sprite 3 and then make a small change to the code. Okay, so here's sprite 3. If I right click on it, I can choose duplicate, and this gives me sprite 4. Now sprite 3 and sprite 4 are absolutely identical in terms of code. I'll just move this code to a different place on screen for sprite 4, so you can see that's sprite 3, that's sprite 4, but the actual code itself contains the same blocks. For sprite 4, all we're going to do is we're going to change these pointing direction blocks. Okay, so we're going to change it to -30 and -150. Okay, that means that they will go in opposite directions. Okay, I'm just going to I'm going to set the timer. I'm going to just change the timer to a higher number. Let's change the timer to 15, because that way we don't need to watch the whole game to see the split. So we press play. Here's our initial red ball, and it splits into two other balls. That's exactly what we want to happen. Fantastic. So now for the final part of the game, the final 20 seconds, we are going to end up with 4 smaller balls on screen. Now the principle of what's going to happen with those 4 smaller balls is similar to what's happened to the sprites 3 and 4, the way they interact with sprite 2, i.e. they go to the final location of sprite 2 and then they move off in opposite directions. Now, so we're going to create 4 more sprites, and we're going to adjust the code, because they're all going to have very similar code to the code that is on sprites 3 and 4. We're going to adjust the code so that you can see what's happening. So just to remind you about what we're doing, we're going to go to the costumes here, and we're going to copy this costume. We're going to create a new sprite that looks exactly the same. We're going to, on sprite 5, we're going to make these balls even smaller. So the previous ones were 65. We're going to take these down to 40. So they're a lot smaller now. Okay. And we're going to need this code again. So we'll drag that down onto sprite number 5. Then open up sprite number 5. You see they're actually all the codes piled on top of each other. So we'll move that. And then we need to make some changes. So sprite 5, I'm going to get it to go to sprite number 3 when sprite number 3 disappears. So there's some small changes here. So first off, down here at the end of the game, so when the timer has got to the end, so when the timer's got to 60, we're going to get it to hide and stop the whole thing. We're going to change this section. So if the timer is greater than 20 or less than 41, we don't need those. So we'll just use the greater than 40. So if the timer is greater than 40, so the timer is increased beyond into the final third of the game, we are going to go to sprite number 3. We'll go to sprite number 3 and we'll pick a random direction to move in. Okay. I can then duplicate this sprite to create sprite number 6, and again it's got exactly the same code as sprite number 5 had on it. You can see that it's the same code, just in a different place. Everything else stays the same, except we remove the minuses from the direction that it moves in. Okay, so that means that sprites 3 and 4 come out of sprite 2. Sprites 5 and 6 come out of sprite 3, which means we need 2 more ball sprites to come out of sprite 4. I'll just duplicate those and then show you the code on them all in just a moment. So here we are with the code put together for all of the 7 balls that make up the game. So as I said, the code for 5, 6, 7 and 8 are very similar. So code for sprite number 5. We have got a situation where we're going to sprite 3 and we're going in minus random number directions. 30 and 150 don't actually change, they're either positive or negative. For sprite 6, we're also going to sprite 3, but we have positive random number directions. Okay. Sprite number 7, we're going to sprite 4, and we have the negative random number directions. And for sprite 8, also sprite 4, and the positive random number directions. Okay, so I've set the timer. I've reset the timer to 35, so that we can see what the final few seconds of the game look like. So when I press the green flag, you'll see that I've got those 2 balls on the screen, which are the ones which are running in the middle section of the game. And now we move and we've got a total of 4 balls bouncing around all over the screen, which obviously makes things a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult to keep your score down. And hopefully when we get to the very end of the game, we should be left with just the cat on screen at 60 seconds. Perfect. Okay, so just going through the various aspects of the game that we broke down when we started this tutorial. First off, we've coded the movement of our player, the cat. We've then designed and coded the movement of the red balls, and that has been related to the scoring system, the interaction between those objects, and it relies on the timer for the showing and hiding of the various different balls within the game. And in terms of finishing touches, well, we've already looked briefly at sound and put a little sound on, but we've also got instructions to put in the game. So I'll just put that together now, along with a red border to stop you just hiding your character right up in the corner of the screen. So the final thing that we need to put together is the instructions for our game. We know that it all works, and we know that we've got all the sprites put together for the various different actions that we want to happen on the screen. On the backdrop here, on the stage rather, on the stage we've got the code that sets in place the timer and a little bit on the sound as well. And it's the stage that I'm going to use to put the instructions together. Now we can design more backdrops, basically. At the moment we have just got one backdrop, and we're going to have 3 in total for our game. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to draw in a rectangle which will create a border for our screen. So we're going to make everything 100 and then get rid of the fill. And this means that we can now draw ourselves a rectangle. So we'll draw that here. Actually, I'll make it a bit thicker. If we make it about 5, we should be able to draw a rectangle on the screen which just takes up the whole of the screen there. And let go, and then that is now on the screen. Perfect. So that's our standard backdrop, the one that we want to be happening or to be seeing pretty much throughout the game. However, we can add text to this for our instructions. So we hit the T button here. We can then choose a font. I'm going to choose the marker font, and we can choose whichever colour we want for that. Click spacebar to start the game. Whoops. Game. Okay, so that's going to be our opening screen. We're then going to duplicate this, and we're going to remove the text. This is going to be the screen that we're going to use for the duration of the game. We're then going to duplicate that, and we're going to put in some more text that says time's up, what was your score? Okay, and we'll just move that up to front and center. Okay, so we've now got 3 backdrops. Now what we need to do is put some code together which tells the game when it should show those backdrops. So let's go to the code section. So when the green flag is clicked, we want to be showing the backdrop that's got the instructions in it, which was backdrop number 1. So we'll go to the looks blocks and say when the green flag is clicked, switch to backdrop number 1. Okay. When the space key is pressed, we want to go into backdrop number 2, which is the one that doesn't have any of the writing on it. So backdrop 2. Okay. And when the game is over, we want to switch to backdrop number 3, because that's the one that says time's up, what's your score? So backdrop 3. Okay. So when I hit the green flag here, click spacebar to start the game. That's exactly what we want it to say. When I hit the spacebar, then everything has disappeared. We obviously see the 4 balls, and this will continue until the 60th second, the end of the game. I'm also going to add a couple, well, one more thing, and also make one small change. So, right at the very bottom of the control blocks, we've got this stop block, which we've used before. We've got a variety of options, and in this time, on this occasion, we're going to stop all. So at the end of the game, we're going to stop everything. Okay. I've remembered to change the timer and the score back to being set to 0 at the start of the game. And actually, just thinking about things, because the whole timer is going to go up to 60, for the final 4 balls, the 4 smallest balls, I'm going to change their time to say if the timer is greater than 59, which means it's 60 or above, then that's the point at which it will hide and stop. So I've made that change to each of sprites 5, 6, 7 and 8. As you can see, they are all running to 59 seconds. Which should now mean that the game works in the way that we intended to. So click the green flag and everything's set up. Click the spacebar and everything is starting. And I'll show you the end of the game to see the end of it. Great, so there you go, there's the end of the game, and I got a score of 45. So, time's up. If you can build this game, see what your score is. So that's our finished game. I think that's slightly more complicated than some of the other ones that we've done, but hopefully it was something that you were able to follow and make work for yourself, and you can obviously adapt it to your own design, so you can have your own colour range in there rather than just the red that I've chosen, or you could put a backdrop in there so long as the backdrop doesn't have any of the same colours in it that you are trying to avoid. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing you on another tutorial at some point in the future.